I can't help but think about Poland because since we both live here, do you have any data about Poland? Because
Poland is a weird place for cross-cultural research.
Okay.
And this is what I've been told by Polish researchers, so I don't want anyone to get mad at me for insulting Poland, is that it somehow is in the middle of everything. So it might be because of the cross now of Western, Eastern kind of modes of being, right? So the older people still have this kind of communist infection, for lack of better words, whereas the younger people are more Americanized. That's one of the things I like about Warsaw in particular, is it's very Americanized. I mean, English is everywhere, right, for example. And I just go up to a server and there's almost no chance that they don't speak English, for example. And so I suspect that that's part of why it's in this cross. Now, Polish people are not particularly narcissistic in a selfish way, in a personal way, but they seem to be a little bit communally narcissistic in that they seem to think of themselves as a group, like Poland is great. Right? So communal narcissism is not about I'm great. It's about my group is great. My team is great. So it's a little bit nationalistic kind of pride. It's touching on this kind of idea, which, I mean, we have marches here, and this is kind of partly where these marches for solidarity and things like that come from, are this groupish mentality which comes from communism, plus the kind of narcissistic Western thinking of we're great, and so the group is great, right? So I'm not necessarily great, but I'm great because I'm part of the group.
And that's, we're speaking men and women.
Yes, I mean, in almost all cases, men are more narcissistic than women are. So in data we have from about 11,000 people in 49 countries, there is no country in which women are statistically more narcissistic than men. So in some places, like, say, Japan, there's not a statistically significant difference, which means that the difference in means is not large enough. But there's no point where you say women are more narcissistic than men in any place, right? Women might be more narcissistic than other women in other places, but there are no countries that we've yet, right, sampled that women are more narcissistic than men, because there's a greater upside for being a jerk, basically, for being showy, for standing out for a man, no matter where he is. But for women, there are risks that can be intolerable in a biological and a psychosocial way that women aren't willing to tolerate, right? So narcissism often drives risk-taking behavior. And if you're a risk-taking woman and you have a child, that child's not likely to survive, for example, unless you give it to your mom or something like that, right? And so the upsides, there are more upsides for being narcissistic, psychopathic, Machiavellian for men, and fewer downsides than there are for women.
Because living here for like 10 years, we see that women, for example, love to take care of themselves, their appearance, and they look just stunningly beautiful. And they And in the other side, and this is all my love to my Polish friends, we tend to see that now it's different. Warsaw is different. We tend to see that men, they really don't care. They're like dressed.
Agreed.
So is there, and you're telling me now that women tend to be less narcissistic than men?
Yeah, I've thought of this one a lot too, because obviously I like fashion.
Right.
But I think to boil narcissism down to only care of the aesthetic is insufficient, right? So there's more to it. It's also about, for example, leadership and dominance and grandiosity. So maybe Polish men are advertising, or their narcissism is being expressed not through their clothes, which it is too. If you go to places like Piano Bar, you can tell a lot of this, right? But maybe it's through their cars, for example, right? So maybe they have fancy cars that are souped up. Especially in Wola, there's Ferraris and Mercedes-Benz like driving down the street with their loud mufflers, for example. Yeah, it might also manifest in physical aggression. So because men experience fewer physical and psychological costs for being aggressive, their narcissism might come out in terms of, say, fighting, for example. Whereas women, their bone structure is weaker, so fighting is problematic. The issue of the baby comes back again.
Right.
And also our societies tend to say, no, that's not how women solve that. Now, in terms of the fancy clothes, though, it's more likely that women are dressing up for one another than they are dressing up for us, right? And that they're competing with one another. So when you look within women, I suspect that the more narcissistic women are the ones who are doing, for example, cosmetic surgery. So we have data from Iran as an example that women who are narcissistic are more likely to get cosmetic surgery, and that cosmetic surgery is very popular in places like Iran. So this allows women to compete within their group, but they're not really competing with men. And men aren't selecting women typically on their clothes. I mean, like, I kind of might a little bit, I won't lie. But men on average don't, it's like, okay, yeah, we don't care so much. And women don't particularly care so much about our clothes either. So we're using our clothes, maybe you and I, to signal to each other. Like, we see each other's watches. Oh, yep, I know what that watch is. I know what that is, right? But it's women are attuned to these things, but I think clothing is much more intrasexual competition than it is intersexual selection. Yeah.
What are the early signs in narcissism? For example, let's say, and we're going to talk about relationships because you also did a lot of research on that. A lot of the audience of the show, our show, is a lot of women, 70% of women. And when our mutual friend, Paul, suggested that we sit down and talk, the immediate idea I had, because I have a lot of female friends, incredible women, and they're really close to me, like maybe 2 or 3, 4 max. And when I sit with them and I hear their stories with the men, and I'm just like completely astonished. I mean, you deal with this basically in a daily basis, I would assume. But to me, like, 2 things comes, and I might sound narcissistic here. The first thing that comes to my mind...
Embrace it. It's okay. Embrace it.
The first thing, I'm like, where do you find these men? And the second part is like, why do you stay with them? Because they're treating them like complete shit. And I'm ashamed to say. So this is the... And then in the other hand, I look at myself. And sometimes I had this demon. I was like, am I a narcissistic? The behavior, we know. And then I realize how an amazing man I am, because I don't treat a woman that bad. And just recently I was talking with my best friend who was visiting here, and she's telling me what the guy was doing to her. And I said, you know what? I have a guest coming. I'm going to ask this question, and he's going to explain it to me. So I want you to somehow coach our audience through the things. It's like how to get rid of a narcissistic. First of all, how to recognize, to not get involved in that relationship. And second, see the signs coming, and then have the balls. I mean, they don't have balls. I have the courage to leave the relationship.
There's so much to unpack.
Very charged, it's
very
a charged
hard
question.
I mean, one of the problems...
Well, there you have it, guys. If you stayed till the end, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If you would like to learn more or discover more, you can click right here on this video to enjoy more authentic and honest stories. Thank you so much for your support, and I look forward to seeing you soon.